Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regularly scheduled Arts, Entertainment, Parks and River Committee. Joined by my colleague David Rue, we have quorum, so we'll call this meeting to order officially. There are no public comments on any of the items. Maybe it'll stay that way.
Now you can.
I know. That's why I hesitated. So, Mr. Rue, what I'd like to do is take items 1 through 5 on consent with no objections, and there are no objections to that. Yeah, did I say through? Yeah, I meant 1 and 5. 1 and 5.
Like you really wanted to go.
Yeah. Adjourned. No. 1 and 5 on consent. Whew, we did it. So now we'll go to item 2, which is a verbal update on zoo concessions. Do we have? There we go.
Just to confirm for the record, the general public comment is closed. Yeah.
General public comment is closed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Welcome, Ms. Morgan. How are you?
Connie Morgan, Greater Los Angeles Zoo Association. I am very happy and pleased to report that the release of the zoo concessions RFP is falling into place and should be up imminently, shortly. The GLAS is registered on Bavin, so we can manage all that is a part of the RFP process that goes through Bavin. Judy Chu in the city's ITA department has been most helpful in facilitating our ability to use the program, and we thank them. GLASA has sent notification to a list of potential food and beverage and retail organizations that are potential bidders, informing them that the RFP will be posted in short order and they will need to register on Bavin in order to participate. The same notifications posted on the zoo website. The final RFP will appear there as well as on the AZA website and the website of the National Association of Concessionaires. Bureau of Contract Administration has been most helpful in helping us to prepare for the bidders conference. We have met with them. We have their generic conference PowerPoint template, and we have observed a Public Works bidders conference. BCA will be sending a representative to that conference. I'd like to thank the CAO and the CLA offices and the city attorney's offices for continuing to meet with us now almost daily as we dot all the I's and cross all our T's. We will release tomorrow or Monday, and all of us are working together to make sure absolutely nothing is missed, and it is done.
Great, thanks. Any idea when the bidders conference might be able to take place in ballpark?
Yeah, it looks like it might be December 12th
Okay.
or so.
All right, terrific. Well, great work. And so what we'll do is we'll just get a regular update on how this is going, and appreciate all of your work on this.
Well, we appreciate everybody's
Yeah,
helpfulness and assistance. So,
wonderful. It's a good partnership.
yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're joined by Mr. Price. And so this is just a verbal update, and so there's no action to take. And we thank you, Ms. Morgan. And that will get us to the next item to be heard, and that is item 3, Mr. Morales.
Item number 3, Mr. Chairman, is the City Administrative Officer and Chief Legislative Analyst report relative to the operation and maintenance responsibilities for the Los Angeles River. We'll make a note that there was a report uploaded on Monday. It's dated November 26, 2018 on the council file.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And we're joined by Matthias Farfan and Jacqueline Wagner. And just a little bit of briefing on this in terms of it's literally operations and maintenance of the river. So just a little bit of background here is that 13 years ago, when I was on the staff of my predecessor, I staffed him in what was in the Ad Hoc River Committee. So I worked on the ground things in terms of when the master plan was winning its way forward. And so I spent months putting together what I called the River Management and Maintenance Task Force, and we would meet near the river, usually at the Glassell Park Community Center, and within a couple of months after starting it, we would have as many as 40 people at that round table because I discovered that there were dozens of jurisdictional overlays, you name it, DWP, Sheriff's Department, Police Department, Army Corps of Engineers, County Flood Control, the list goes on and on and on and on, which explained why it was so difficult to get anything done at the river, the cleanups, addressing homelessness, crime, and so out of that sort of background, helped formulate my approach to all things river. And I want to thank the CLA and CAO's office for your work on putting together this report, because you've probably discovered some of the same challenges. The river is a beast. I would describe it as a beast. And there's a lot involved, especially as we move forward with Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District and we get that effectuated and monies start coming in from that. We need to be able to actually look at the facility itself and say, well, who manages the landings on the new bridges that are getting built? It's not the city necessarily. It's not necessarily the Army Corps. It's not necessarily, so we have to have great clarity in terms of who does what. And this is a significant first step in helping us forward on how we address operations and maintenance of the river. So with that, we look forward to hearing your report. Thank you.
All right, Matthias Farfan for the CLA's office, and thank you for that introduction. And you're right, the river is a beast. Just in discussions with departments, we found out there's just a lot going on with the river.
Right.
Because of that, and I'll just take us to the beginning, what council instructed us to report back on. And they instructed the CLA and the CAO to report back on two things. The first was the current structure relating to all responsibilities and jurisdictions relative to the operation and maintenance of the LA River. And the second item was for the creation of a strategic management plan with the goal of recommending a clear management structure to carry out the functions of the city, county, and federal governments regarding the LA River. And that said, I just want to emphasize that this report's just reporting back on the operation and maintenance of the river. There have been many capital projects that are on their way in the river. I mean, we have the Arbor Study. Bureau of Engineering has been great with that. They've been the lead on many of those projects. So this doesn't have to do with the projects that are being performed, but what occurs after the projects are completed. That said, since the LA River is such a beast, we decided to break it out into categories. And there were pretty much responsibilities that are within the river channel was one of them. Responsibilities along the riverbank. And the third one was responsibilities when it comes to bridges that cross the river. On the last one, on the bridges, there's different types of bridges. The report goes into that as well. In the report, Table 1 of the report summarizes the current operation and maintenance responsibilities within the river. And as you'll see in the report, that includes things such as trash removal, graffiti abatement, general maintenance, watershed protection, monitoring of water quality, and flood control and permit sign-offs in the channel. And there you can see in the report that there's different responsibilities that go from the federal government, the county, and the city. Regarding the city, currently our responsibility through the Bureau of Sanitation is in regards to watershed protection and the monitoring of water quality within the river. The second category was along the riverbank. And there you have, there's more maintenance needs along the riverbank, and those include enforcement of park hours and rules. There's actually a dedicated recreational zone along the river it's through the city, but MRCA, it's an agreement between us and MRCA that governs that. There's also general emergency response with the river. That's split between the county and the city. On that one, we pretty much found out that that's pretty much just on a request basis. There's no one actively patrolling the river. That's just if there is someone calls in an emergency, then that's when police or fire.
It's usually, in my district, it's either the team, the clean team that I have dispatched at the river every week, or a constituent. And it's probably not uncommon for you, Mr. Rue, as well.
Yes. And then of course, there's landscape and irrigation. That's also divvied up between the county and the city. Within the city, it's not clear which department is responsible for that. As we interviewed departments, it depends on what the issue is who is responsible. There's also trash pickup. Sanitation does some trash pickup. The county does other. Same thing with graffiti abatement. Pedestrian and bike and path maintenance, that's LADOT. They're responsible for that. And then, of course, you got this pedestrian and bike path signage, and that's also DOT, and pedestrian and bike path lighting, that would be street lighting. The final category is the bridges. For that responsibility, it's generally BOE is the project lead to construct the bridge, also for the inspection of the bridges. If services are needed on the bridges, if it's minor, just the potholes and things of that such, street services will take care of those. If it's something that it's more of it's the greater repair of the bridge, then BOE will hire someone to do that. We do have some pedestrian bike bridges that are being built across the river at this point. And the report lists those bridges. Those are different than the current motorized bridges. It's assumed that right now that BOE will do those inspections. They don't currently do inspections on those types of bridges.
Assumptions make me very nervous.
Yes, exactly. And as far as who's responsible for the repairs on those bridges still isn't known.
Yeah.
Because of that leads us to the 3 recommendations that are within the report. Recommendation 1 would pretty much instruct departments, with our assistance, the CLA and the CAO, to report to council within 180 days on the programming and costs associated with the operation and maintenance responsibilities of the river channel, river banks, bridges, and alley river. It also lists several departments and what the responsibilities are. For some reason, BOE dropped out of there for the inspections, but they'll be part of that as well. And the reason for that is to then ramp up to get responses back from departments. If wherever we see there's a gap where not one department seems to be responsible for a current one of the operation and maintenance responsibilities, then at that point we would ask them to then find out if they're interested, and if they are, what are the resources they would need. The hope is to have all the report backs in time for them to be considered as part of not the 1920 budget cycle, but as part of the 2021 budget cycle. Recommendation 2 instructs the CLA and CAO and authorizes us to and coordinate with the appropriate county authorities to identify what their operations and maintenance responsibilities are, and also to start those discussions on potentially creating some sort of cooperative agreement, a master use agreement, or a joint powers authority to actually take on those operation and maintenance responsibilities. If you were to want us to look into the projects and the development river portion of it, that would be something else. But with that, again, BOE has been the lead to date when it comes to those projects. And of course, the recommendation 3 leads to that one, is to also have our office also look into seeing whether there would be a department that could be designated as a lead when it comes to the river, or perhaps then even see if it's feasible to create a department to take on that responsibility. Along with that, we would also likely look into certain things right now, some of the operation and maintenance seem to be split. Like the same operation and maintenance seems to be divided amongst 2 different departments depending on where the service is being provided. So it'd be looking into whether to formalize which department is responsible for that operation and maintenance, no matter where it's located along the river. That said, I don't know if you have any questions or have any clarification.
I'd like to see if Ms. Wagner has anything to add.
Nothing additional to add.
Okay. Well, what's interesting about this, first of all, it's a great report, thank you. And you have in black and white, printed by the City of LA, duties and agencies. There was not too long ago you would call, and I knew some of this just from my research, and I would have to inform them that they had the responsibility, and I would get pushback, well, no, that's not us. So I think that behaviors have evolved along the river since then, but this is great to see this articulated so well.
Actually, I would like to add
Yeah,
something.
please.
I'd like to call out Tim Plummer and Blair Miller of our staffs, because they were really instrumental in gathering a lot of this information and putting the data together. So.
Great, thank you. Did you all have to look at the Army Corps of Engineers? There was a book from either 1941 or something really crazy that contains some of this.
They did.
I wouldn't be surprised-
you
I wouldn't
found
be
it.
surprised that Tim read it.
It was nutty,
Everything.
and it talks about the complicated jurisdictions between the county and the.
Yes.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So you've brought it up to date. That's fantastic. Now, so we're looking at the possibilities here of master use agreement, JPA, things to talk about. We used to always believe that a JPA was the way to get to managing and maintaining and the upkeep and maintenance of the river. Maybe a master use agreement is possibly a first step, because JPA is much more involved to create a JPA, right? But perhaps we get an MOU, essentially for an MUA, and then that could kind of set us on our way to actually having responsibilities and allocations of funds for the specific, responsibility, et cetera. What are your thoughts?
No, I totally agree with that, and in fact, we do have a couple of examples of cooperative agreements and/or MOUs where we do between different agencies that does spell out roles and responsibilities. So yes, absolutely agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
And we currently have some for specific projects along the river, but there isn't the one master list of all those agreements or something that ties them all together.
Right. And you mentioned a lot of agencies, and are there any key agencies that stand out that we should really kind of bring into our office and start talking to about some of these things?
County.
Well,
County?
The county,
Yeah.
the Army Corps always needs to be
Okay.
involved, the MRCA.
But specific to this, the management and operations, specific to that.
It would just be mainly the county
Yeah.
and the city.
Okay, all right. That's kind of what I'm thinking as well. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Colleagues, any questions or thoughts about this report?
Good.
Yeah, we're good? Thank you so much.
You want to read I don't know if Roy wants to read the
Yeah.
recommendations into the
Mr.
record.
Chair,
Okay, please.
We're trying to figure out if the recommendations, the specific recommendations need to be read.
No,
in
we'll just, I think we'll just approve the report.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
All right.
Appreciate it. Mr. Morales, that brings us to item 4.
Item number 4, Mr. Chairman, is Department of Cultural Affairs report relative to the updated annual expenditure plan and fee status report for the Arts Development Fee Program for fiscal year 2018-19.
Fantastic. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon.
So we're going to give us a brief overview of the annual expenditure
Yes.
report.
Felicia Filer, and I'm joined by,
Tanya Picasso.
and I'll just give some opening remarks, and then I'll turn the report over to Tanya to sort of walk you through the report and the attachments, et cetera. So this is our 5th year of preparing this expenditure plan, and I think we believe that the hallmark of a well-rounded public art program should include both permanent as well as temporary public art projects. And many cities around the arts development fees in other cities are limited to just permanent artwork. They can either, commission murals or sculptures and permanent works. But our city's ordinance is written so broadly that we can support the widest variety of art projects and cultural programmings available. And this report, we think, reflects that variety.
Okay.
Our work with the council offices have identified both permanent works, festivals, and temporary projects, most notably the temporary public arts triennial. Additionally, the report will show that the number and the amount of priority fees that are the oldest fees in the trust fund we have made a significant progress in reducing those fees. We've reduced it from $1.7 million, 5 years ago, now down to $400,000. So we're doing an excellent job of spending the oldest fees first, as well as the amount of money being committed for expenditures is increasing, which is our commitment to trying to keep up with the pace of development in the city. So now I'll turn it over to Tanya to sort of walk you through the report, and then we'll be here to answer any questions.
Okay. Thanks.
Great. Good afternoon. So what you have before you is the actual narrative report along with 3 attachments. So I'll go over the first attachment, attachment A, as part of this year's expenditure plan. So throughout the months of September and October, Department of Cultural Affairs met with every council office to identify priority projects and projects that were of interest to implement in this current fiscal year, and some of them which will spill over into the next fiscal year. In some instances, these council offices had very clear ideas of what the projects would be, as allowed in the administrative guidelines. And in that case, it was very easy to identify the project based on a signature event, such as a festival. In other instances, the council offices needed 2 to 3 weeks to have internal discussions and determine which projects they would prioritize. All of those projects are then captured in this attachment document, and it also includes an accounting detail. So by identifying...
But pause for just a moment. Someone is purposely making all sorts of racket to disrupt this meeting. It's obvious that it's on purpose. Started when you walked in, Mr. Herman. You're disrupting the meeting with your behavior. And it doesn't always require you yelling something insane either. You're just banging things around, and it's very disruptive, and you need to stop that. This is your warning. Please continue.
Thank you. And so attachment A reflects the projects that were identified by the council offices, as well as the accounting details and the project typology for those fees that are at the 5-year mark that require a finding. A finding is something, a proposed use for the fee that stops the clock and no longer puts it in a jeopardy of being refunded, which is one of the reasons why we come before the committee and council every year, so that we can protect those fees and identify the projects. You have a total of $4.5 million approximately in expenditures for this year's report that we are asking for approval. So that's an attachment A. Attachment B outlines the fees that will be identified for the current public art triennial from each council office's allocation. This year, we are asking, it's a total budget of $3.2 million, of which $1.2 million was approved last year in last year's expenditure plan.
So how much last year?
1.2.
This year?
This year, it is 1.5. And so that's attachment B. Attachment C reflects all of the expenditures with arts development fees money to date, starting back from fiscal year 14-15 through the second quarter of this current fiscal year. That gives us a total of $4.6 million and a total number of 228 council-specific projects and citywide projects, which includes the first iteration of the public art triennial. That's essentially the report. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer any questions or clarifications that you may have regarding the narrative or any of the attachments.
Thank you so much. You answered one of my questions, and you have met with every council district already in relation to the expenditure plan. You've already done that.
Correct.
Thank you. And the ADF guidelines have now been in place for 4 years, and so you're drawing down the one fund that is outlined in the approved guidelines, the administrative guidelines. Do you have any elaboration on that and how that's working, and how the kinds of revenues that are being generated as opposed to before, and how that has sort of shaped your approach in the department?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is the speed of development, private development in the city. It seems to keep increasing, and 4 years ago we had a total of $10 million in the trust fund, and it's now up to $18 million. So the biggest challenges for us is to deploy those dollars at a speed that is, that can respond to that growth. One of the challenges even this year that this expenditure plan will result in 64 discrete public art council identified projects. So we have to sort of wrap our heads around how do we manage, implement, 64 projects in the span of 12 months. So that's a really big challenge, for the department.
And Ms. Fowler, we've talked about this before, but have you thought about with these extra funds, which is an incredible blessing?
Yes, it is.
Have you thought about an approach that isn't necessarily specific council by council district, and just some larger, more regional, within the city, like catalytic sort of art projects that might account for council districts 4, 13, and 1, for example, as opposed to just a council district
I think, the general manager and the AGM, and we're interested in sort of coming back to you to sort of present a couple of scenarios in terms of how we might make that happen. We do have a couple of ideas, but we sort of want to, use you as a touchstone to see if we're on the right track.
I'm interested in lasting installations, maybe permanent, semi-permanent, et cetera, sculptures, artistic installations that help define a city's, culture, that are, like I said, permanent, things like that. And
Yeah.
how within this framework that we have, this operating framework, how we can accomplish some of that as the monies come in.
And you're absolutely correct. There are about 5 permanent site-specific projects as part of this year's expenditure plan. The challenge with using ADF for permanent projects is that we don't control the real estate. So, either working with the council office, we'd have to identify the location, and then all the costs associated with site preparation and construction and demolition, et cetera, makes citing a permanent public project on a city site where there's no new construction very difficult. I think using ADF dollars. Conversely, we do have the city's municipal public percent for art program. And so when there is new construction in our new police stations and homeless shelters and libraries, in those instances, we're able to commission permanent site-specific art because, again, there's a general contractor involved, the site preparation is done, and so it's easier and less expensive for the city to commission permanent works there. But using ADF dollars, I think the one project that we're working on with your office, it's really difficult to assemble the real estate
Yeah.
and get all the permissions to make a permanent work. So it's not impossible, it just
Right.
is...
And it hasn't really been a focus of ours so much. That's kind of not the practice, but maybe we could start entertaining the thought of doing some sort of permanent and wonderful art installation at Griffith Park, for example, as an entry into the park, or the name of the park went out of my head, but the one downtown. It's about to undergo renovation.
Spring?
Not Grand, because that's county, but
First and Broadway.
First and Broadway?
yeah, some of the other city parks. The one that's in front of the Biltmore, what's that? What park is that?
Pershing
Pershing Square, for example, that's like one of the city's historic parks. Something that would be, I don't know, a cultural identifier and permanent, things like that. Just starting to think, our thinking can evolve in terms of how Los Angeles approaches artwork, permanent and temporary installations, especially on city property. So I throw that out there. All right, colleagues, any questions or Mr. Price?
Well, first of all, I just appreciate the effort. You guys really have made a difference in getting resources out, and I appreciate it. A couple questions, though. What are priority fees as opposed to other fees? What's a priority fee?
Priority fees are fees that have hit the 5-year mark. So per the State Mitigation Fee Act, a finding needs to be made on all fees that hit from 6 months from the time that a fee has hit a 5-year mark. So,
Because if you're not spent, we lose it? Or-
correct, correct. And so we make a finding. A finding is just basically identifying a use for the fee, a typology.
And what is the arts fee? What is the fee that developers pay on projects over 500,000? I mean, is there like 2% or 5%? What's the fee?
1%.
It's 1% of the building permit value.
And Mr. Price, we're starting to explore what it would look like to increase that 1% based on the overall cost of the project. So, for example, if you have a $1 billion skyscraper, if instead of 1%, maybe there could be a table that gets you up to 1.5 or even 2. Other cities do that, and they have greater art as a result. So we're exploring that, and I've been wanting to do that for a long
I would
time.
encourage that exploration. 'Cause I think
Yeah,
we should-
right? I think so,
we'll take
too.
advantage of while we can.
Third that.
Good, all right.
And the,
So moved.
And this only applies, the ADF, only ADF program only applies to private projects, right? It's not, doesn't involve any city.
No, the city's it's called the Public Works Improvement Arts Program. The city does have its own percent for art
That's another
ordinance.
percent, that's a percent.
That's correct, and that's 1% on the construction value, which is closer to what Councilman Burke was describing.
In terms of helping organizations get the money out, I know we've adopted a process now of identifying project producers, if it's an event or whatever. How has that been working? From your perspective, how has that, has it been an effective way to allocate resources or?
Well, we established a pre-qualified list of professional festival producers and programmers to be able to respond to some of these projects that come up in a timely fashion. So the great thing about the pre-qualified list is that they have been vetted by a professional peer panel, and we have their qualifications. We have a list of about 46 festival producers that are on call to produce large-scale, small-scale, medium-scale events in the city. Typically, when a council office identifies a festival, we look at the list and we cull it down to see who's available based on contract amount, timing of the festival, experience, their portfolio, and the appropriateness of their expertise. And we work in consultation with the council office to identify and to kind of finalize the short list of producers to be invited. And then we have an interview process. And this is typically for contracts that are over $25,000, which have to go through a public bid process, as you know. And in some instances, the process seems to go fairly smooth, because the festival producers do have that expertise, but there's also some challenges that occur in terms of festival producers actually doing the work and also having the council office be involved as co-producers of the event. Because what we're learning and what we heard is that it's...
Excuse me. You just disrupted the meeting again, and you've been warned. So there's the door. Armando Herman disrupted the meeting a second time with an outburst, and he's disrupting it again. And he needs to leave peacefully and quietly, and he isn't, and he continues to disrupt.
I'm leaving with that.
And now he's leaving.
Right there, keep saying,
Disrupting using racist language, verbal abuse, hostile environment, and he's leaving, not quietly. Armando Herman disrupting the meeting a second time. We've had to stop the meeting twice now for his outbursts, and he's disrupting continually as he leaves, for the record. My apologies.
And so what we've heard from the council offices is that sometimes that interview process, it goes smooth, but when it comes to implementation, there are some bumps along the way, as might be expected. And we took note of some of the council offices and their feedback, particularly your office, and looking to ways to kind of refine that process so that it ends up being a smoother match. But because what we do acknowledge is that when it comes to festival production is that the council office really is the experts with the constituents on the ground, and the festival producers kind of need to take the lead from the council office in terms of what the needs are. And it's about really kind of finding that nice harmony between the council office's role and their expertise, as well as the festival producer's ability to come in and add that creative freedom to kind of implement and give them what they might want. So we took copious notes and are trying to fine-tune our process to be a little bit more inclusive of that and take that into consideration. There's something else you might want to ask?
And in terms of projects, I know, we're doing murals, we're doing festivals, we're doing a number of artistic activities. Would it include like a monument or or some kind of a monument that identifies an area or a neighborhood? I mean, are those eligible for these funds?
Yeah, absolutely. That's permanent artwork, yes.
We'll be back.
Taking notes.
How can you be back if you never leave? We're here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, we've been thinking in my office as well about re-looking at this art development fee with a 1% fee, and I am very open to that. Yeah. And I was trying to figure out when would be the right time, because I am also cognizant of the fact that often we are the city is told that it's too bureaucratic or there's too many fees assessed. So I don't know when is the right time to introduce it, but I really think, especially for these arts projects, because in my district we're using all the money. We could use more. And I would love to see some sort of a sliding scale or something like that. Or even the fact is, because clearly this fee, the developer could actually have their own art projects on site, and if they don't, they pay a fee, right?
Correct.
So maybe we could even, when we do explore in the future, say increase it. If they did a project, because because technically, I love it in other cities where they have lots of statues, sculptures, monuments as part of their project, development project. And we don't have to do it. I don't mind if the developer does it, the private developer.
Yeah.
So we should encourage that, and if they do it, great. If they don't, maybe we charge a higher fee.
Right.
Right?
You know, interesting, we've had the discussion, and we're going to continue this, and we're asking for some information about this. We're getting some feedback right now currently, and that is, you know, I'll take the $1 billion skyscraper example, so what's 1% of that 1 million, right? 100 million, no, 10 million.
10 million.
So imagine if you had a scale that got up to 2%, if your project reached $1 billion, or if it got up to 1.5% if your project reached $500 million. That's tens of millions of dollars more just for art in the city of LA. And the larger the project and the larger the investment portfolio, the more you can afford in terms of, you know, fees.
Right.
So I think that we could land on something that wouldn't burden the small sort of development productions. And, you know, you could do things like exclude affordable or permanent supportive housing from the fees. I mean, we could think very creatively about how we do this. And
Or maybe a smaller fee for.
Right.
it stays at 1%.
But if that $1 billion project used $10 million to do an art project, then it's $10 million. But if they choose not to, then it'll be sliding scale, so it's 15 million.
Exactly.
So, because I would rather, I don't want to see art projects just on public land, right? I would love to see art projects in private lands, and encouraging them to do so. Because, and the more we incorporate it and make that into a mainstream, because even for private buildings, commercial or otherwise, I mean, that could be an attraction.
I mean, look at Rockefeller Center in New York.
Right.
With, is it Neptune's statue? I mean, that's all private property, and that's one of the great iconic images of art in New York City, right? And so I'd like us to start thinking on those lines a little more. Los Angeles historically has just not put its value in this type of focus.
Yeah.
And I think and I've said this like a broken record, but world-class cities have world-class art and culture, and world-class cities support that effort financially and with resources.
And we've made tremendous strides as of late, but still we are far behind. And I think there's a lot more we could do.
I agree. Yeah. Good discussion. Yeah, thank you. So with that, I recommend that we just approve this report. And thank you so much for all of your work and working with the council offices, and onward and upward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No more items on the agenda. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.